I step forward. 1. The sand crunches under my boot and I can hear it, really hear it, above the ringing in my ears from the explosion 5 minutes ago. 2. My right leg trembles as I shift my weight. It's 127 degrees. My suit is trapping every degree against my skin, and sweat is pouring into my eyes, but I can't wipe it away. 3. Because my hands are extended in front of me, holding the detector that might save my life or might miss the pressure plate that will end it. 4. The radio in my ear crackles. Jackson, you don't have to do this. We can call in the drone strike. 5. But I know what they don't. 6. There are 43 children in that school ahead of me. 7. I counted them through my scope an hour ago. 8. 43 faces pressed against the windows watching me. 9. Watching me walk toward them. 10. Because there's a 500-pound IED somewhere in this building, and the insurgents have made it clear, if we evacuate, they detonate. 11. If we strike from above, they detonate. 12. The only way those kids live is if someone walks through this corridor they've turned into a minefield, reaches the school, and cuts the wires before the timer runs out. 13. I have exactly 9 minutes left. 14. And I have to take 126 steps to reach the entrance. 15. Not 125, not 127, exactly. 126, 16. Because that's the distance I measured, and in this job, precision isn't a virtue, it's survival. 17. Each step is approximately 30 inches. 18. I calculated it 3 times. 19. 126 steps of hell between me and those kids. 20. My commander thinks I'm crazy. 21. My team thinks I have a death wish. 22. But here's what they don't understand. 23. What nobody in the entire US military understood until I figured it out 6 months ago. 24. The standard metal detector they gave us. 25. It's designed to find metal. 26. Revolutionary, right? 27. Except the insurgents stopped using metal. 28. They use plastic containers, wooden pressure plates, graphite wiring. 29. All invisible to our million-dollar equipment. 30. So I learned to listen. 31. Not with the machine. 32. With my feet. 33. With the vibration in my bones. 34. With the slight change in resistance when sand has been disturbed. 35. They all thought I was insane when I started walking routes without turning on my detector. 36. Until I found 17 IEDs that the equipment missed. 37. 17 bombs that would have killed my brothers. 38. Now they call me the Walker. 39. Because I walk where machines fear to scan. 40. And right now, machine or no machine, those 43 kids only have one chance. 41. Me. 42. And these 126 steps. 43. If my story resonates with you, please hit the like button to bring a little light to this father's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming life stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me so happy to know what corner of the country or world you're listening from. My name is Marcus Jackson, and I'm 35 years old now, sitting in my backyard in Georgia, watching my own kids play. But 12 years ago, in the scorching summer of 2013, I was a staff sergeant in the United States Army, assigned to the 764th Explosive Ordnance Disposal Company in Ramadi, Iraq. They sent us to the worst neighborhoods, the places where every doorway might hide a bomb, where every pile of trash could erase you from existence. The official casualty rate for EOD techs in Ramadi that year was 43%. Almost half of us wouldn't make it home. But statistics don't mean much when you're the one wearing the suit, when you're the one making the walk. See, there's a fundamental problem with how we fought that war, how we tried to beat an enemy that had nothing to lose and everything to hide. We brought technology, they brought patience. We brought drones and robots and sensors worth millions. They brought fertilizer and old artillery shells and the willingness to bury them for months, waiting for the perfect moment. And in that equation, the only variable that mattered was the human one. The guy willing to walk into the unknown, The guy willing to trust something deeper than circuits and satellites. That's where I found my edge, in the place where training ended and instinct began. In those 126 steps between me and those children, I carried every lesson I'd learned, every mistake I'd survived, and one truth that nobody wanted to believe. Sometimes the simplest solution is the deadliest, and sometimes the only way forward is one careful step at a time. I grew up in a place where the loudest sound was cicadas in summer and the Sunday church bells. Valdosta, Georgia, population 5500, where everybody knew your name and your business and your grandmother's sweet potato pie recipe. My father worked at the paper mill for 37 years. My mother taught second grade. I was supposed to follow a simple path. Finish high school, maybe go to Valdosta State, get a job, settle down. Nobody in my family had ever been in the military. But when I was 17, I watched the towers fall on a television in my high school cafeteria, and something fundamental shifted in me. I enlisted 3 days after my 18th birthday, despite my mother crying and my father's silent disappointment. Basic training at Fort Benning was the easy part. What came after, EOD school at Eglin Air Force Base, that's where they separate the committed from the crazy. 6 months of the most intense technical training the military offers. We learned chemistry, electronics, physics, demolition theory. We learned how to take apart every explosive device ever created, from World War II artillery shells to improvised insurgent bombs. The washout rate was 60%. Of the 80 guys who started my class, only 32 graduated. I was number 7 in my class, not because I was the smartest, but because I had something the others didn't. I grew up hunting with my grandfather, and he taught me patience. He taught me to read the land, to notice when something was out of place, when the birds went quiet, when the air felt wrong. Those lessons from Georgia pine forests would save my life in Iraqi deserts more times than I could count. By 2013, I'd already done 2 tours. I'd defused 127 IEDs and been blown up twice, once by a secondary device, once by a remote detonation that threw me 15 feet into a concrete wall. I had shrapnel in my left shoulder and a traumatic brain injury that gave me headaches that felt like my skull was splitting open. The army doctors kept asking if I wanted to go home, if I'd had enough. But how do you go home when you're good at something that saves lives? How do you sit in Georgia drinking sweet tea when you know there are guys over there who might die because you weren't there to walk point? So I volunteered for a 3rd tour. That's when everything changed. The insurgents had evolved. They'd learned that our robots could defuse most bombs remotely, so they started building devices specifically designed to kill the robot operator. They'd learned that our metal detectors were our primary tool, so they eliminated metal from their designs. Command kept throwing technology at the problem. Better robots, better scanners, better protective equipment. But here's what I noticed. The technology was making us stupider. We trusted the machines more than our own senses. We'd walk right past signs of disturbance because the detector didn't beep. We'd send the robot down a street that any local kid could tell you was wrong, just wrong, in ways that sensors couldn't measure. So I started an experiment. On my own time, I'd walk routes we'd already cleared, but I'd do it without turning on any equipment. I'd just walk and feel and listen, and I started finding things. A slightly different texture in the sand where someone had dug and refilled. A pattern in the trash that was too organized, too deliberate. The absence of cat prints in areas where cats should walk. I found 3 IEDs this way in my first month, devices our equipment had completely missed. When I reported them, my commanding officer, Captain Reynolds, pulled me aside. "Jackson, you trying to get yourself killed? You walk routes without your detector active again, I'll write you up for reckless endangerment." But the next week I did it again, and I found 2 more. Then Reynolds called me into his office, and I thought I was done. Instead, he closed the door and said, "Teach me." Turns out he'd been tracking my finds. He'd noticed that I had a 93% success rate at locating IEDs, compared to the unit average of 67%. He wanted to know what I was doing differently. I tried to explain it. The feeling in your feet, the micro changes in resistance, the way sound travels differently over disturbed earth. He listened for 2 hours, then said, "You know what you're describing? You're describing what combat dogs do. You're smelling the bombs with your feet." He wasn't wrong. I'd somehow trained myself to detect the same anomalies that took dogs years of conditioning to learn. The brass heard about my technique and wanted to integrate it into training protocols. They sent specialists to interview me to document my process. But here's the thing about instinct. You can't really teach it. You can't put it in a manual. It's the 10,000 micro-observations your brain makes without conscious thought, filtered through experience and survival and something close to prayer. They wanted an algorithm. I gave them poetry. They wanted data. I gave them feelings. Eventually, they gave up trying to systematize it and just let me work. I became the unit's walker, the guy they called when standard procedures failed, when the route was too dangerous for the robot, when lives hung in the balance. And I walked. God, did I walk. Through markets and alleys and roads and fields, through 140-degree heat and sandstorms and mortar fire. I walked routes that killed other EOD techs. I walked into situations that made grown men refuse orders. And I kept finding the bombs. I kept bringing my guys home. Until the day I walked 126 steps that changed everything. It was August 14th, 2013. We got the call at 0600 hours. Insurgents had occupied the Al-Rashid Primary School in the Green Zone's outer perimeter, a building we thought was secured in an area we thought was safe. They'd taken the school without firing a shot, just walked in when the guard went to pray, locked down the building, and started making demands. But this wasn't a hostage situation in any conventional sense. They didn't want prisoner releases or ransom or political concessions. They wanted us to watch. They'd wired the entire school with explosives. We could see them through the windows, daisy-chained charges running through every classroom, enough to bring down the entire structure. And they put those 43 children in the main assembly hall, right where the blast would be worst. The message they sent to command was simple. Send your drones, we detonate. Send your soldiers, we detonate. Send your robots, we detonate. The only chance these children have is if one man walks the path we've prepared and reaches the detonator before time runs out. They gave us a time, 2 hours, and they gave us a route, exactly 126 steps from the nearest safe position to the school's entrance, through what they called the gauntlet. Intelligence suggested the corridor was mined with at least 20 pressure plate IEDs, but the exact number and locations were unknown. Each device was estimated at 25 pounds of homemade explosive, enough to vaporize a human being. The entire command structure descended into chaos. Generals were calling in from Baghdad. Washington was getting briefed. Everybody had an opinion. The consensus was clear. We couldn't risk it. We couldn't send a man on a suicide walk to maybe save those kids when we could evacuate the surrounding area and minimize overall casualties. But I was standing there watching through binoculars, and I saw a little girl in the window. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She was crying. And I thought about my niece back home, my sister's daughter who was 7 and had the same dark hair, the same eyes. I thought about how that little girl in the window didn't understand geopolitics or insurgency tactics or acceptable loss ratios. She just knew she was terrified and wanted her mother. Captain Reynolds found me on the roof where I was watching. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stood there with his own binoculars. Finally he spoke. "Jackson, I can't order you to do this. Nobody can. This isn't war. This is murder disguised as tactics. They want to kill you specifically. You know that, right? This whole thing is designed to lure out our best EOD tech and make an example." I kept watching that little girl. How many steps did they say? 126 according to their message. They measured it precisely. They want us to know they're in control. I did the math in my head. 126 steps at 30 inches each. That's 315 feet, the length of a football field plus 5 yards. I'd walked longer routes before, but never one where I absolutely knew it was mined specifically to kill me. Never one where each step had been calculated by someone who wanted to watch me die. "I can do it," I heard myself say. Reynolds grabbed my shoulder. "Marcus, listen to me, this is a trap, the whole thing is a trap. They probably have the school rigged to blow anyway. Those kids might already be dead. This might be a recording, a setup to take out our best guy. Then the kids are already dead, and I die for nothing. But if there's a chance, There's always a chance. There's a chance a meteor hits the building in the next hour. There's a chance they all have a crisis of conscience. You can't calculate probability when the game is rigged. I turned to look at him. Sir, I've walked 127 IEDs. I've defused devices that should have killed me 50 times over. I'm still here because I learned to listen, to feel, to know when the ground is wrong. Those insurgents are good, but they're not magic. They buried those devices by hand. They disturbed the earth. They left traces. I can find them. And if you're wrong, then I die doing what I was trained to do. And maybe, just maybe, those kids get a few more minutes of hope before the end. Reynolds was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out his radio. Command, this is Reynolds. I have a volunteer for the walk. Staff Sergeant Marcus Jackson. He's our best. If anyone can make it, he can. The radio exploded with voices, protocols, objections, legal concerns. Reynolds cut through all of it. With respect, sirs, while you're debating, that clock is ticking. We have 93 minutes left. It'll take Jackson at least 40 minutes to suit up and make the walk, assuming he survives. We're wasting time we don't have. There was a long pause. Then a voice I recognized. General Morrison, the theater commander, came on. Put Jackson on. Reynolds handed me the radio. Staff Sergeant Jackson here, sir. Son, I'm not going to blow smoke. This is a suicide mission dressed up as heroism. The statistical probability of you surviving 126 steps through a kill corridor is less than 8%. I cannot in good conscience send you. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. Sir, I didn't join the army to play it safe. I joined because buildings fell and people died, and someone needed to stand between evil and innocence. Right now, those kids are innocents, and I'm the only thing standing between them and evil. Statistics don't mean shit when you're the one walking. Respectfully, sir. Another long pause, then, God help us all. You have authorization to attempt the walk. Command will maintain radio contact. We'll have snipers covering every angle. But Jackson, they probably have counter-snipers. The second you start walking, you're in the most dangerous piece of ground in Iraq. You understand? Yes, sir. But I've been in dangerous ground before. I know how to listen. I handed the radio back to Reynolds. He looked at me with something between admiration and grief. Let's get you suited up. The EOD suit is 80 pounds of Kevlar, ceramic plates, and cooling systems. It's designed to protect you from shrapnel and blast waves. But here's the dirty truth they don't tell you in training. If you step on a 25-pound IED, the suit doesn't matter. You're not coming home. The suit is psychological more than practical. It makes you feel protected so you can function. But I knew, putting on each piece, that I was essentially wearing an elaborate burial shroud. My hands shook as I sealed the helmet. Not from fear. Well, not just from fear. But from the adrenaline, the hyper-awareness that comes when you know the next hour will either be the finest of your life or the last. I walked to the starting point, exactly 126 steps from the school entrance. They'd marked it with a yellow flag. The insurgents had been specific about where I had to start. Any deviation and they'd detonate. I could see them watching from surrounding buildings, dark shapes behind broken windows. I could feel their eyes like physical weight. The radio crackled. Jackson, you have 67 minutes. The timer is synchronized with our systems. We'll count down every 10 minutes. Roger that. Beginning approach now. I took the first step. 1. The sand crunched. I froze, listening. Nothing. No click, no trigger, no explosion. I exhaled slowly and took the second step. 2. My detector was in my hands, but I didn't turn it on. It would give me false confidence, and false confidence kills. Instead, I let my feet read the ground. The third step. 3. I could feel the resistance. Normal sand, undisturbed. 4, 5, 6. Each step, a small eternity. Sweat was already pouring down my back inside the suit. 7, 8. The detector suddenly screamed. Metal signature 3 feet ahead, 8 inches right of my current trajectory. I froze. This was their first test. They'd planted something they knew I'd detect, something obvious. The question was it real or a decoy to push me into the real trap? I studied the ground. The sand looked wrong there, too smooth, too perfect. Someone had carefully groomed it. But 6 inches to the left, I could see a slight depression, barely visible, where sand had settled after being disturbed. 9. I stepped left of my original line, avoiding the depression. Nothing happened. I glanced back at the metal signature location. It was a decoy, probably just a buried can or piece of rebar, placed to push me into the real device on the left. They were clever. 10, 11, 12. I settled into a rhythm. Scan, feel, step. Scan, feel, step. Each footfall a negotiation with death. 13, 14, 15. The radio. "You're doing great, Jackson. 45 meters covered." 45 meters. That left about 51 meters to go. I was barely a third of the way. 16, 17. My right foot touched down and I felt it. The slightest give in the sand, not enough to trigger a pressure plate, but enough to tell me something was hollow beneath. I stopped breathing. 18. I had stepped between 2 devices. 1 millimeter to the left or right, and I'd have been paced. I could feel them under my feet, symmetrical, designed to create a kill box. No way to go but forward. 19. I had to trust that they'd made the safe path wide enough for a careful man. They wanted me to reach the school. They wanted to maximize the psychological impact when I finally failed. 20, 21, 22. I was shaking now, not from fear, but from the strain of absolute precision. Every muscle locked, every sense amplified. 23. 24. The detector screamed again, another metal signature. But this time, I ignored it. I'd learned their pattern. They alternated real threats with decoys, trying to confuse, to make me doubt my instincts. 25. I stepped over what I knew was a real device. I could smell it, the faint chemical signature of homemade explosives seeping through the sand. 26. 27. 28. Behind me, I heard Reynolds on the radio. "Snipers report enemy movement in the northeast building. They might be repositioning for a shot." "Copy, continuing." 29. I couldn't stop now. Stopping meant dying. Movement was life. 30. 31. 32. I thought about that little girl in the window. I thought about my niece. I thought about every person I'd ever failed to save. 33. 34. 35. The sand changed texture beneath my feet. Rockier, harder. More dangerous because variations in density made pressure plates harder to detect. 36. 37. 38. My detector went quiet. The metal signatures had stopped. Either I'd passed the primary kill zone or they'd switched to all plastic devices. I assumed the latter. 39. 40. 41. Halfway there. 63 steps down, 63 to go. The school was close enough now that I could see faces in the windows clearly. The children were pressed against the glass, watching. Some were crying. One boy, maybe 10 years old, had his hands in prayer position. 42. I was walking for him, for all of them. 43. 44. The ground dipped slightly. Water damage, probably an old drainage line. But drainage lines meant disturbed earth, which meant perfect places to hide devices. 45. I sidestepped, trusting my gut over the visible path. 46. Behind me, I heard a pop. Sniper fire. Someone had tried to shoot me and our counter-snipers had taken them out. "Keep moving, Jackson. We've got your back." 47, 48, 49, 50. I was in the zone now, what athletes call flow state. My conscious mind had stepped back, letting the trained, instinctive part of me take over. 51, 52, 53. Each step felt right, felt safe, in ways I couldn't explain if you put a gun to my head. 54, 55. The detector suddenly screamed so loud I nearly dropped it, massive metal signature directly in my path. But something was wrong. The signature was too big, too obvious, too perfectly placed. 56. I studied the ground. There, 20 feet ahead, slightly right. That's where the real danger was. A patch of sand that looked exactly like every other patch but felt wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. 57. I adjusted my path, arcing right to avoid what I knew was there. 58, 59, 60. The school was close now, maybe 40 meters. I could hear sounds from inside, children crying, someone praying in Arabic. 61, 62. My left leg cramped, dehydration, heat, stress. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I might never start again. 63, 64, 65, push through, 66. The radio crackled. 32 minutes remaining. Not enough time. Even if I reached the school, I'd have to find the detonator, identify the wiring, make the cuts. 32 minutes to do what usually took an hour in controlled conditions. 67, 68, 69, 70. 3/4 there. I could see the school entrance clearly now. The doors were chained shut from outside. I'd have to cut through that before I could even enter. 71, 72. My detector went dead. Battery failure. Perfect timing. Now I was truly walking blind, relying entirely on instinct. 73, 74, 75. The sand felt different here. Looser, more disturbed. This was their final kill zone, the place where they expected me to die. 76. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, so loud it drowned out everything else. 77, 78, I was hyperventilating inside the helmet. 79. Control your breathing, control your mind. 80, 81. I thought about my father at the paper mill, his steady hands, his patient approach to every problem. Be like him, steady, patient. 82, 83, 84. I thought about my grandfather in the woods, how he taught me to move without disturbing, to read what others couldn't see. 85, 86. I was channeling everyone who ever taught me anything about survival. 87, 88, 89, 90. The number felt significant. 90 steps, 36 to go. I could smell the school now, chalk dust and fear and explosive chemicals. 91, 92. My right foot touched down and I felt it, the slight click of a pressure plate beginning to depress. I froze. Absolute stillness. If I lifted my foot, it would detonate. If I shifted my weight, it might detonate. I was standing on my own death, separated from oblivion by maybe 10 pounds of pressure. Jackson? Your movement stopped. What's happening? I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was perfectly balanced on one foot, my right foot keeping just enough pressure on the plate to prevent it from springing. The suit was crushing me. 80 pounds of gear on one leg. I could feel my quad beginning to shake. Jackson, respond. I couldn't. If I moved my mouth, shifted my jaw inside the helmet, it might change my center of gravity enough to trigger the device. I was a statue, a living, dying statue. Seconds passed. My leg was screaming. I could feel the muscle beginning to fail. This was it. This was how I died. Not from stepping wrong, but from not being able to hold position. 93 steps, so close. I thought about those 43 children. I thought about that little girl. I thought about dying 33 steps away from saving them. And something happened. Some reserve of strength I didn't know I had. Some fundamental refusal to give in. I slowly, microscopically, began to shift my weight backward, trying to redistribute it so I could lift my right foot without changing the pressure. Millimeter by millimeter, the pressure plate held. I was balancing on one leg, 80 pounds of gear, 127-degree heat, pulling my foot back with infinite slowness. Reynolds was shouting on the radio, but I couldn't hear the words. Just noise, just distraction. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably 90 seconds, my foot lifted clear. The plate didn't trigger. I had somehow maintained exactly the right pressure through the entire movement. 93. I placed my foot down 6 inches to the left and felt solid ground. 94. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. 95. But I kept moving, kept walking. 96, 97, 98. The school was right there. 20 more steps. 99, 100. I could see the chains on the door. I could see my target, 101, 102. The ground here was concrete, safer, harder to mine, 103, 104. I was almost running now, as much as you can run in an EOD suit, 105, 106, 107. The radio, 21 minutes, Jackson, 108, 109, 110. I could see the children pressing against the windows. They were screaming, calling to me. 111, 112, 113. 15 more steps, 114, 115. I pulled out my bolt cutters, 116, 117, 118. 10 meters to the door, 119, 120, 121, 5 meters, 122. The chains were visible. I could cut them. 123, 4 meters, 124, 3 meters, 125, 2 meters, 126. I was at the door. I'd made it. I'd walked 126 steps through hell, and I was alive. The chains took 30 seconds to cut through. I kicked open the door and ran inside. The main assembly hall was directly ahead. I could see the children, see the explosives daisy-chained through the room. And there, mounted on the wall, the detonator, a simple digital timer showing 19, 47, and counting down. The device was sophisticated but standard, C4 wired to multiple detonation points, all leading back to a single trigger mechanism. I had maybe 30 seconds to assess before I had to make my cuts. The problem was immediately clear. They'd set a trap within a trap. There were 2 sets of wires, red and blue running parallel. Standard doctrine said cut the blue. But I could see the solder points were wrong, the connection angles off. The blue was the trigger wire. Cutting it would complete the circuit. I traced the red wire with my eyes. It ran through a series of redundant connections, probably designed to make me doubt. But the final connection point was clean, professional. That was the real detonation wire. I positioned my cutters. "Please," one of the children said in Arabic, "please save us." "I've got you," I said. "Close your eyes." I cut the red wire. Nothing happened. No explosion. No click. The timer kept counting down. 18, 03. I'd cut the wrong wire. No, wait. The timer was still running, but the circuit was broken. This was a psychological timer, not the real trigger. Where was the real trigger? I scanned the room. There, in the corner, behind a desk. A second device, smaller, with its own power source. The insurgents had known someone might disarm the obvious bomb, so they'd hidden a backup. I ran to it. Timer showing 17, 28. This one was cruder, simpler. Just 2 wires, white and black. No trick, no misdirection. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right one. I cut the black wire. The timer stopped. 17, 11 frozen on the display. The room went silent. Then one child started crying, then another. Then they were all crying and screaming and calling for their parents. "It's okay," I said in broken Arabic. "You're safe, you're all safe." I went to the door and opened it. "Clear," I shouted. "Building is clear." My team rushed in, medics, soldiers, everyone. They started evacuating the children. Reynolds grabbed me, pulled off my helmet. "You crazy son of a bitch, you actually did it." I couldn't speak. The adrenaline was leaving my system and I was crashing hard. I sat down on the floor, still in my suit, and just breathed. 126 steps, 315 feet, the longest walk of my life, and every single child walked out alive. Looking back now, 12 years later, watching my own children play in my backyard, I think about that walk constantly. Not with pride exactly, not with regret, with something more complicated, a recognition that we're all walking through minefields of one kind or another. Some are literal, like the one I crossed that day. Most are metaphorical, the dangerous paths we choose because someone needs us to, the steps we take even when we're terrified because the alternative is abandoning innocence to evil. I learned that day that precision matters, that every step, every decision, every moment of attention can be the difference between life and death. But I also learned that you can't calculate your way through everything. At some point, you have to trust your instincts, trust your training, trust that the 1,000 small lessons you've learned have prepared you for this exact moment. The army gave me a silver star for that walk. They put my technique into training manuals, tried to systemize what I'd done. But you can't systemize courage. You can't create an algorithm for the decision to put one foot in front of the other when every step might be your last. I left the army a year later. The headaches got worse, the nightmares more frequent. I'd used up my luck, and I knew it. But those 43 children are alive today because I took that walk. Some of them are adults now with children of their own. I got a letter once, translated from Arabic, from the mother of that little girl I saw in the window. She said, "You gave my daughter a future. Thank you for walking toward us when everyone else stood back." That's what I want my own children to understand, that the hardest walks are the ones worth taking, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it, and that sometimes saving the world is as simple and as terrible as counting to 126, one step at a time. If I could tell you one thing from those steps, it's this. We all have our walk to make, our distance to cover under fire. The question isn't whether you'll be afraid. You will be. The question is whether you'll take the first step anyway.